What's going on, everybody? Mortem here, this time bringing you some more Pillars of Eternity and Avowed lore, and today we are talking about Woedica, the queen that was, the Oathbinder, the exiled queen. Now, before we jump into any of that, I just want to say there will be spoilers for both of the Pillars of Eternity games in this video, so if you don't want those, maybe watch this another time. But with that out of the way, Woedica is the goddess of law, memory, rightful rulership, and vengeance. Now, when Woedica was empowered by the Ingwithans, like all of the other gods were, of course, which is how they became gods, Woedica was supposed to be the ruler of all of the gods. And supposedly at the apex of her power, she was capable of basically anything. However, the other gods, seeing this and the fact that despite that Woedica is the goddess of law, she often breaks her own rules as she sees fit to accomplish her goals. So the other gods saw all that, were like, well, that's not for us. And they collectively apparently waged some sort of attack against her that brought her down on level with the other gods. Now, I do have more to say about that, but we'll get into it at the appropriate time. But let's just put a little pin in that for now. Now, it is worth mentioning that supposedly Woedica is depicted as this burned woman in tattered robes because of this attack. Supposedly she was burned in Magrin's fires of war, and that's why she has the appearance that she has now. Now that said, even in exile, Theos Ix Arcanon still serves her. So Theos was the Ingwithans' designated head person on Eora that was supposed to lead and carry out their plans of establishing their pantheon basically throughout time. That was Theos' job. And Theos was assigned to do what Woedica told him to do. So supposedly, even after Woedica was dethroned, Theos continued to serve her in this way. Which is also convenient because the gods agreed to an oath of sorts that prohibits them from directly acting on Eora after some incidents in the past involving Abaddon and the Titans and stuff, all of which I've made lore videos about previously if you guys want to check those out on my channel. Woedica circumvents this agreement that the gods had by using Theos to do her bidding. And Theos' main job is to keep the secret of the gods a secret. And that secret being that they were made, not that they always were. Now, Woedica, again, sidesteps a lot of the rules of the universe to help Theos maintain this ability. Woedica, and not just Theos actually has a section, so to speak, of followers that she calls her favored. These are people that Woedica goes out of her way to resurrect and reawaken their souls every time they pass through the cycle, which is Eora's cycle of life and death. Basically, she makes sure that no matter how many lives these people lead, they always remember exactly who they are and that they are in league with Woedica. This allows them to continue to do her bidding across lifetimes and generations. Now, in addition to her favored, Woedica is worshipped by people like lawyers, judges, just people often connected to local governments, and anything involving the rule of law. She also has a paladin order that is dedicated to her, basically called the Steel Garrote, so that is something as well. Woedica's appearances throughout the games are as follows. In the first game, she is the unseen antagonist. She is the one actually pulling Theos' strings. While Theos is the one we interact with and everything, Woedica is the person doing the planning behind the grand picture, if you will. Now, we never interact with Woedica directly in the first game. However, it's worth mentioning that after you dispatch Theos, one of the options for the ending of the game is to actually follow through with Theos' plan and use the Hollowborn souls from that game to empower Woedica, to allow her to supposedly take her place among the other, above the other gods again. That is an optional ending for the game. You can do that. Now, because Pillars of Eternity 2 is a direct sequel, you might be wondering how that affects the game. Well, interestingly enough, it doesn't. They seem to sidestep that entire issue just altogether. So what do I mean by that? Well, basically, if you choose to empower Woedica in the first game, in the second game, it basically doesn't do anything. You can actually talk to Eothas about this, and he'll be like, yeah, that's more of a fanciful thing she likes to think happened that didn't really happen as far as we're concerned. And that supposedly, according to Eothas in the second game, there was never a leader among the gods to begin with. Which brings me back to that pin we put in that first topic of whether or not Woedica ever actually ruled the other gods. Because according to some things in the second game, it might not have ever happened. But then we have to ask ourselves, why was Theos trying to re-empower her in the first game? Why does Woedica have the demeanor that she has? Is she just like low-key insane? Which, actually would kind of sort of make sense in the grand scheme of the gods throughout the Pillars of Eternity series. Now, truthfully, I don't have a definitive answer for that, but my point is that's how it's presented in the second game, so I wanted to mention it here. At the very least, it seems Woedica might be exaggerating the power she once held over the other gods. Though, we know from the fact that Theos was assigned as their designated person on Eora, that there does seem to be some truth to the fact that Woedica was at least the designated contact among the gods for him at the very least. Now, the other thing we can do in Pillars of Eternity 2 is obtain the Burned Book of Law. So basically, after you go to Nekataka for the first time and then leave, you'll be given the Burned Book of Law. Now, this actually wasn't in the original release of the game, but Pillars of Eternity 2 initially didn't explain a lot of the plot points particularly well, or at least it didn't fill in all the gaps, I should say. And the Burned Book of Law was added in a content patch later on, specifically to fill in those gaps. The Burned Book of Law allows you to speak to Woedica directly, and in those conversations, she'll explain some of the broader machinations of the gods and their overall plans, and why certain things play out the way they do. Basically, it's a reaction to the fact that they left some holes in the writing throughout the game, and the Burned Book of Law is intentionally designed to fill in those gaps, and Woedica just happens to be the god telling you about it. Now, whatever involvement she has with Avowed, there is some speculation she'll be heavily involved with that. It has yet to be seen, so I can't really speak about it. But with that in mind, guys, I hope you enjoyed the video, hope you learned something. If you did, please remember to like, comment, subscribe, all that YouTube jazz. But regardless of any of that, truly, just thank you so much for watching. May you wander in wisdom, and have an amazing day.